The morning sun filtered through the canopy of the ancient forest, casting dancing shadows on the moss-covered ground, where Julia knelt beside her weathered leather bag. She had come to the sanctuary as a wildlife researcher, armed with notebooks, cameras, and an insatiable curiosity about the rare mountain lions that roamed these protected lands. What she hadn't expected was to become the unwitting target of a particularly mischievous cub's affection. It started 3 days ago when she first noticed the small, golden eyes watching her from behind a fallen log. The cub, no more than 3 months old, had been observing her morning routines with an intensity that both amused and concerned her. Julia knew the rules: maintain distance, never feed the animals, respect their wild nature, but this little one seemed to have different ideas entirely. Oscar, the head ranger of the sanctuary, had warned her about this particular cub. "That one's trouble," he'd said with a knowing smile, his weathered face crinkling at the corners. "Lost his mother to poachers 2 months back. The elders of the pride have been teaching him, but he's got a stubborn streak. Seems to think humans are more interesting than his own kind." Julia had laughed it off then, but now, as she heard the telltale rustle of leaves behind her, she understood exactly what Oscar meant. She pretended to be absorbed in her field notes, scribbling observations about the adult lions she'd photographed yesterday. But her peripheral vision caught the small, tawny form creeping closer, belly low to the ground, tail twitching with barely contained excitement. The cub's approach was anything but stealthy. He tumbled over a root, recovered with a dignity-preserving shake, and continued his mission toward Julia's open bag. She bit her lip to keep from smiling, maintaining her facade of oblivion. The sanctuary's protocol was clear: if the animals approached voluntarily and weren't encouraged, natural interactions could be observed and documented. This was science, she told herself, even as her heart melted at the sight of those oversized paws padding closer. From the ridge above, the elders of the pride watched with ancient knowing eyes. 3 lionesses lay sprawled on the sun-warmed rocks, their tails flicking lazily. They had seen this dance before: the young one's fascination with the human female who smelled of kindness and showed no fear. The eldest lioness, her muzzle grayed with age, made a low rumbling sound that might have been amusement. The others responded with soft chuffs, but none moved to intervene. Oscar observed the scene from his post near the observation shelter, binoculars raised. He'd been a ranger for 30 years, had seen countless interactions between humans and wildlife, but this was something special. The elders were allowing it, which meant something. In all his years, he'd learned that these magnificent creatures possessed wisdom beyond human understanding. If they permitted the cub's exploration, there was a reason. Julia felt rather than heard the cub reach her bag. A tiny paw, still soft and clumsy, reached out and batted at the canvas. She continued writing, her handwriting becoming increasingly illegible as she struggled to maintain composure. The cub grew bolder, pressing his small face against the bag's opening, whiskers twitching as he investigated the foreign scents within leather paper. The remnants of her morning coffee. Then came the sound that shattered all pretense of professional detachment: a deep, rumbling purr that started small and grew until it seemed to vibrate through the very earth. The cub, apparently satisfied with his investigation, had decided that Julia's bag made an excellent bed. He circled once, twice, then curled into an impossibly small ball of fur, his purring intensifying until it resembled a tiny motor. On the ridge, the elders exchanged glances. The eldest rose slowly, stretching each leg with deliberate care, and began to descend. Oscar tensed, his hand moving instinctively toward the radio at his belt, but the lioness's movements held no aggression, only purpose. She approached Julia with measured steps, her eyes locked not on the human but on the sleeping cub. Julia's heart hammered in her chest as the massive predator drew near. She remained motionless, barely breathing, every instinct screaming at her to run, even as her training told her to stay calm. The lioness paused 5 feet away, close enough that Julia could see the individual whiskers on her magnificent face, could smell the wild musk of her fur. The great cat looked at Julia with eyes that seemed to pierce through all pretense, all fear, to something deeper. Then, with deliberate slowness, she lowered herself to the ground and closed her eyes, a mirror of the cub's position. The message was clear: she trusted Julia with the young one, at least for this moment. Oscar lowered his binoculars, a slow smile spreading across his face. In 30 years, he'd never witnessed such an encounter. He pulled out his own camera, documenting not just for the sanctuary records, but because he knew no one would believe this without proof. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher, warming the small clearing where a human woman, a cub, and an elder lioness rested together in an unspoken truce. Julia eventually allowed herself to relax, her hand moving slowly to rest near her bag, close enough to feel the vibration of the cub's continued purring but not touching. When the cub finally stirred, stretching with exaggerated yawns that displayed needle-sharp baby teeth, the spell broke gently. He tumbled out of the bag, rubbed against his elder's massive paw, and bounded off into the undergrowth with renewed energy. The lioness rose, gave Julia one last penetrating look, and followed at a leisurely pace. Julia released a breath she hadn't known she was holding. Her bag bore the evidence of its small occupant: tufts of tawny fur, tiny claw marks in the canvas, and a warmth that seemed to linger. She looked up to find Oscar making his way down the ridge, his expression a mixture of amazement and professional concern. "Well," he said, settling beside her, "I guess that cub's officially adopted you. The elders have spoken." Julia laughed, the sound bright and free in the mountain air. "What do I do now?" Oscar considered the question seriously. "You document it, you respect it, and you never forget that this forest has given you a gift that few ever receive: the trust of the wild." As they packed up her equipment, being careful to preserve the fur in the bag as a memento of the extraordinary encounter, Julia understood that she had come to the sanctuary seeking data and leaving with something far more precious: a story that would define her career and a memory that would warm her heart for all her remaining days. The purring had stopped, but its echo remained, a reminder that sometimes the most profound connections transcend species, language, and all the barriers humans erect between themselves and the natural world.